Hello, my name is Victoria Vale, and I will be presenting my Rationale Assignment for Counseling and Collaboration Techniques class. To begin, I would like to present my personal objective in this presentation. I aim to define and outline my personal collaboration style in conjunction with my biblical worldview, and hone in on how it affects my ethical attitude towards my educational philosophy. In this presentation, we will be looking at 3 approaches to educational collaboration. We will compare and contrast what each collaboration style looks like, and then discuss the benefits and weaknesses of each. To begin, we will look at teams. In the teaming approach, teachers, administrators, parents, coaches, or directors, or any other applicable adult surrounds the student to ensure that they receive the most individualized education that they can, so that they can be the most effective student as possible. The second approach we will look at is co-teaching. In a co-teaching relationship, the general education teacher and special education teacher work primarily in the same classroom to provide an education for all students. And finally, we will look at coaching. In a coaching relationship, the coach provides the information and instruction to the teacher so that the teacher can grow as a professional. The teacher will then take what they learn and apply it to their classroom in an indirect relationship. First, I would like to look at teaming. Friend and Cook define teaming as an educational team is a set of interdependent individuals with unique skills and perspectives who interact directly to achieve their mutual goal of providing students with effective educational programs and services. I would like to highlight a couple of words in this definition. The first is the mutual goal. Teams work together for one reason: to provide the best education they can for a student. Often, these relationships are to provide individualized education. The most common form of teaming that we see in a classroom is the one of special education. However, there are a couple of other possibilities as well. I aim to be a middle school or high school English professor, in which I will be a teacher of the English Language Arts, also known as ELA. In the ELA classroom, there are a couple ways that teaming would be applied to me. The first is the departmental team. The departmental team shares responsibilities in the English department of a secondary school. Often, especially in high schools, the departmental team comes together to outline curriculum, objectives, calendar of due dates, and perhaps even budgetary needs if they provide any additional services outside of the classroom. As a part of the English department, in my future classes, I go in with the expectation that I will work together with anyone who teaches English in the same grade level. When it comes to grade levels, in a middle school, especially in smaller schools, a middle school team is formed. The same group of students may wander from class to class, and they do not change who they are with. In this setup, the middle school team can come together to speak specifically about one class. For example, say a 5th hour class had some issues focusing on the lessons. We can come together as a middle school team, for example, the English, history, math, and science teachers, and talk about whether or not it is simply a matter of focus in the class based on the time of day, or if there are behavioral issues that need to be addressed. The other team that I have already spoken about is a student-centered team, in which the teachers and parents of one student gather to improve their personal education. In a special education environment, especially when students have individualized education plans, the student-centered team must come together to make sure that these plans are being followed. From a biblical worldview, I believe that teaming is a reflection of the body of Christ. And in doing so, we should reflect the positive side. Only let your behavior do credit to the good news of Christ, so that if I come and see you, or if I'm away from you, I may have news of you that you are strong in one spirit, working together with one soul for the faith of the good news. I'd like to emphasize the words working together with one soul. As we mentioned before, teaming has a mutual goal, and their mutual goal is to provide the best education that they can for their students. So we should unite just as the body of Christ unites with the goal of spreading the gospel. There are a couple of concerns for this approach. Everyone on the team must be aware of the confidentiality. Parents have the expectation that their students will maintain a confidentiality, and that is something we must adhere to. Everyone on the team needs to be aware of the expectations and should be held accountable for what they do. The attitude and respect towards other team members is an ethical issue that arises should there be disrespect. We need to ensure that we treat everyone with courtesy and kindness, and that we listen to all viable options. In a team, we are often divided into different roles. We are given specific responsibilities, and we must make sure that we adhere to them. Having accountability is an issue that sometimes is neglected. When it comes to ethical issues, we must make sure that we do not use shortcuts or skip parts of the process. Often, when it comes to teaming, everything is cataloged. We take notes, we record our findings, and we make sure that it is being effective. As educators, we must ensure that we are not using the ends to justify the means. If we skip part of the process, we can affect our results, and we can very probably affect the outcomes. This is something that we should make sure nobody does in a part of a team. Within a team, often leaders are chosen, and sometimes, even if they aren't chosen, they emerge. Those who have leadership skills should be recognized, and often if we have a leader in a team, we can go to them should we have any concerns, and this could eliminate conflict before it arises. The next approach I would like to address is co-teaching. As I mentioned before, the co-teacher works together with a general education teacher, often in the same classroom. Friend and Cook define co-teaching as a service delivery option for providing specialized services to students with disabilities or other special needs while they remain in their general education classes. Co-teaching occurs when two or more professionals jointly deliver substantive instruction to a diverse, blended group of students, primarily in a single physical space. In a co-teaching relationship, there are numerous ways in which this might look like. If you look at figure 7.1, there are numerous approaches to co-teaching, and everyone has a different style. The most common that you will see, specifically when it comes to special education, is on the bottom right, one teaching and one assisting. You can see that one teacher is at the front of the classroom, which is often the general education teacher, and one teacher, the special education teacher, is roaming the room to provide the assistance needed, especially to their IEP students. In the first approach, one teaching and one observing, if we looked at that in an English classroom, it would look like the figure on the top left. One teacher would simply observe and provide feedback to the teacher who was giving the class. Secondly, in station learning, the teachers work together to divide and conquer. If we were to use this in an English classroom, perhaps in a poetry unit, just to use an example, each teacher might have a different poem on each table. The students would rotate from table to table, discuss the poem, and then move on to the next poem. At the final table, where, should we not have enough teachers, the students can use one to work together themselves, after working with the other teachers. The third approach is parallel teaching. If you look at the figure on the top right, you see that some students are facing one teacher and other students are facing another. In doing so, the teachers can teach at the same time, and they have just the same amount of time and do not have to divide the lesson. However, this can also cause a problem of noise, because two lessons are going on at the same time. Should you have students that get easily distracted, this is probably not a very viable option. In the fourth method, the alternative teaching approach, if you look at the figure on the bottom left, one teacher is teaching in a lecture style, as we often do. However, the other teacher, often the special education teacher, will teach in a more personalized space. If I look at this in an English classroom, the general education teacher will probably provide a lecture or a typical method of instruction, whereas the special education teacher will use what the general education teacher teaches to point out specific examples. This allows students to learn in a more confined area should they need to. The next approach is one of teaming. The teachers work together and share the lesson. They share the lesson plan, they share the lesson time, and they share the responsibilities of working with the students. If you were to have a teaming relationship, you must be very close with your co-teacher and very patient with each other. And the final is one teaching and one assisting, which is the most commonly used and I believe one of the most effective, especially in a high school setting. From a biblical worldview, I believe co-teaching is another way that we can reflect the body of Christ. But our bodies have many parts, and God has put each part just where He wants it. Just as the body of Christ has different parts and different members, and each member plays just as vital a role as the next, so it is with a co-teaching relationship. Co-teaching is often referred to as a marriage relationship in an educational setting. We must understand each of our roles, and we must be willing to be flexible and work together in this kind of relationship. A couple of concerns about co-teaching is understanding each other's instructional beliefs. At the beginning of a co-teaching relationship, each teacher should provide their educational philosophy to the other and ensure that they understand where they are coming from and what their expectations are in the classroom. We must ensure that we have parity in the relationship and that each teacher is valued. And we must also know what our expectations are for discipline in the classroom. Should something arise, we cannot have a divided front during a situation. This is something that the teacher should address before they begin teaching together. And finally, we must provide feedback for each other. Should we want to grow in our roles as educators. This feedback should be constructive criticism, and we must be aware not to say anything negative about our co-teachers.